Welcome back to the podcast, Dare, the time of your life, formerly Life's Booming, brought to you by Australian seniors. Hi, I'm Jean Kittson. In this episode, we're celebrating the growing number of Australians over 50 who are embracing new experiences and pushing their limits, proving there is no expiry date when it comes to adventure. Stoking our sense of adventure and kickstarting our curiosity is increasingly important as we get older, and to help us understand why it is important is Dr. Roy Sugarman. Roy is a clinical psychologist and clinical neuropsychologist who works with professional athletes, special forces and corporate leaders. He is also head neuroscientist for education technology company Boxplay. And joining Roy, someone who needs no introduction, 7 times world champion surfer Layne Beachley. Layne has been pushing the boundaries of women's surfing since she first stepped on a foam board aged 4, and she has gone on to win a record-breaking 6 consecutive world titles. Although she has been retired from competitive surfing for almost 2 decades, Layne still hits the waves every day. And she has ventured into another career altogether, sharing her story and helping others as a motivational speaker and co-founder of Awake Academy. Welcome, Layne, and welcome, Roy.
Lovely to be here.
It's so great to have you both here with us and talking about this really important topic about, keeping on pushing ourselves and challenging ourselves.
It was interesting when you said in the intro about, am I too old for this? I had an experience this weekend, actually. You might be able to help me out with this, Roy, where I was competing for my Board Riders Club, and I was one of the oldest in the whole field, and I did come out of the water because it wasn't as enjoyable as it normally is competing. I did have that mentality, I'm too old for this. Now, do you put that down to the fact that it's just because I'm tired? Or can I just, are you allowed to be too old for this?
Well, absolutely. You can choose whatever time were you too young for it at 4 years old?
No.
So if you weren't too young for it at 4 years old,
no.
keep going. But what happens is if I look at my athletes who keep training through 60 years old, they don't show signs of aging. So you've got 90-year-olds who run triathlons and do Ironman simply because they never stopped. When you look at their muscles, when you look at their hearts, they're 30 years old.
Right.
So what's the mindset? Mindset becomes your biggest thing. Doing the difficult thing, that's the correct thing to do when you have a choice. And the point is you thought you have a choice.
Well, I do have a choice, and I also believe it's the recovery process and the space that you have around it, because at 90 years old, there's not much else really going on in your life that's going to distract you too heavily from being able to take good care of yourself. But that starts now. We don't wait till we're 90 before we start taking care of ourselves. So I'm just thinking, now that you've said that, now that I'm in my 50s and I'm still competing, I need to actually have more space for preparation and recovery to enjoy it more.
Yeah, I think there are 4 pillars. There's the mindset pillar, there's nutrition and movement, and recovery is your 4th pillar.
Okay.
Right. Say that again. Recovery is
so mindset's your first important part of
this
that.
is... Yes. And then the next one is...
Movement and nutrition are critical as you get older, and even the rot starts early, so when you're young as well.
Yeah.
And that 4th pillar is recovery time. So
where you rest and put your feet up.
Don't overtrain.
You don't have to work
overdo
on
it.
recovery, do you?
You do. You have to.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, you have to work for recovery.
Well, there's
have
active and passive, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh, now we're getting technical. All right, can you say what active, recovery and passive is in a few words that we people who aren't sports people will understand, please?
Well, active recovery would be things like massage and acupuncture and compression therapy and ice therapy and heat therapy. And, yeah, that would be the active.
And the passive is a glass of wine, the telly on, the feet up. Right?
Well, preferably coconut water.
Yeah.
Not something that's all not something that's inflammatory like alcohol.
But for
What else?
someone...
So going for a walk.
Yeah, going for a walk.
So going for a walk, doing some stretching, doing some yoga, very light stuff. Just keeping going but being active, getting out of bed at the same time, go to sleep at the same time. Those are more passive recovery, doing some heart rate variability training. endless
Look, I'm
list.
feeling too old for this, as you're saying that. I have never sort of worked in that way, in a routine or with, that much care.
Television
So
doesn't provide that, does it?
television, no, I don't really watch a lot of television. I do just a lot of, I don't know what I do, running around. I run around, headless chook, and then sit down and, but.
With a glass of wine.
Yeah, with a glass of wine. So when for you to have that pass through your mind, I'm too old for this. This is what happens to, I think, a lot of people when, as they get older in later life, they think, well, maybe I am too old for this, and I don't know whether it's their mindset or other people are putting it on it. You were out surfing with younger people. Did you get that impression that other people were looking at you like that, or did it come from yourself?
No, it came from myself. I don't care about how people look at me and the judgments that they may cast upon me. It's more around my opinion of myself that's the most important. I think it also came down to how my body was feeling and the energy that I was able to put into the performance, and the mindset is also a reflection of how I'm feeling within myself. So I've been in a moon boot for a few weeks. Yeah, not ideal preparation either, and so I'm really conscious about allowing that injury to heal, but while still being able to do what I want to do. And that's another thing that slows us down as we get older, is the injuries and the progression of injuries, and then honouring the injury and allowing it to heal.
And the point that changes as you get older, which is something for younger athletes as well, is you can't be outcome focused, because that is going to be a negative for you. Yeah. Like the doctor says, you have to lose weight. That's your outcome. Well, reaction theory, somebody's telling what to do. But important part of what Layne said is that the opposite of a competitive mindset is psychological flexibility, which means I'm going to take my eyes off the end result. I'm going to just go for process. I'm going to enjoy what I'm doing. I'm going to love what I'm doing. How well I do, these other people can beat me. They're quicker, faster, stronger, younger, which is very sad. But
yes,
their rot has already started, And, people say, but you're 72, are you slowing down? The answer is, I hate old people. And I'm one of them. Some ageist as hell. But what Layne said, very important, focus on the process of enjoying what you're doing. Forget about the outcome. The outcome may be beyond you today.
Well, this is expectations, isn't it? And the expectations we have on ourselves. So, for instance, if we've been an elite athlete like you have, your expectations of yourself must be enormous. And then you retired. How did you know when it was time to retire?
Well, I knew because I wasn't willing to do the work outside of the water to generate the results that I expected of myself within it. If I have this expectation to perform well and win, then that has to be measured or correlated with the training, the preparation, the nutrition, all of the things that need to be invested into performing my best. And I wasn't willing to do that work anymore. I was distracted. I was looking over the fence. I was craving a life outside of surfing. And knowing that I wasn't willing to do the work, I could have easily stayed there and just qualified and made up a number of the girls on tour, but that's not who I am. I perform and I prepare to perform well. I wasn't willing to do the preparation. So it was easy to make that decision. But to that point around expectation, I'm a 7 times world champion. I won 6 in a row, but I won 5 in fear and 2 in love. And the 2 love-based world titles were the process-driven ones, and the 5 fear-based world titles were outcome-driven. So it's too easy to get stuck. And I say that because I've proven that you can succeed in both mentalities, but one costs you a lot more than the other.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's where you find the values shift, because you have to be valid and authentic as an athlete. And what you've described is how your values shifted and you became a valid and authentic version of yourself at whatever age, which means you can do the difficult thing. That's the correct thing to do because you had a choice.
Right.
And when you have a choice, you choose according to what's valid for you. Those are your values, and that gives you the psychological flexibility. Competition doesn't matter so much. Being flexible and enjoying what I'm doing and the return on investment and what it's going to cost is a value-based decision.
Right.
So if you're going to be happy and cross the line, as we call it, right?
Yes.
You cross the line from being a pro to enjoying your life.
Can't you do both?
If you're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
But, I really love the authenticity and validity of what Layne said. I made a values-based decision, and I was going to go now for the process. I loved 2 of those competitions because I was in it for the love. Young athletes come up loving what they do, and then money or success or extrinsic motivators get there. Intrinsically, it wasn't motivating for you. You'd mastered it.
Yeah.
So that sense of mastery, the idea of getting better and better at what's important to you, shifted. And that's great. That's authentic.
Mm-hmm. But to that point around choice, even when you say I don't have a choice, that in itself is a choice.
Yes. I choose not to choose.
Yeah.
That's the easy way, right?
Yeah. I don't have a choice.
I think we're all susceptible to extrinsic motivation and influences, and even in our everyday lives, it's very hard to sort of chill down and be true to yourself and make the choices that you want to make. We're all, even if we haven't been athletes, most people have made enormous sacrifices in their life for their families or their partners, or maybe they've had to deal with illnesses and trauma, and there's so to get to a stage in your life where you can understand yourself better, which is what I loved about hearing about your Awake Academy, and hearing podcasts about how you have done a lot of work on self-awareness, and how much that has informed the way you feel about yourself. You no longer, when you win a competition, you feel like a winner. When you lose a competition, you feel like a loser. How that's gone from your life, and now you're sharing that with others. And I think that's a wonderful thing you're doing. Is it giving you a lot of satisfaction? What's that bringing you? Why did you decide to do that?
Well, when you become successful, as you know, I mean, everyone wants to know how you do it. And if you're able to deconstruct it and present it in a relatable way that people can take something from, that's why I do it. I'm constantly doing the work on myself to then help people see themselves in me. I'm not putting myself up as the beacon and the light of perfection, because I'm as imperfect as you are. But what I am doing is saying I'm imperfect, but I'm also vulnerable and authentic in that. And I want to help you become more vulnerable and authentic within yourself. So at Awake Academy, we're really inspired to help people be their best selves to live their best life. So to live your best life, you have to know who you are first. To achieve something great in the world, you have to know who you are, because once you know who you are, then you can start working towards what you want. But sometimes, especially as kids, we put what we want ahead of ourselves, and we lose ourselves in that. And I did that in those fear-based world titles. I won that first one and then went, okay, to be worthy of something else, I have to be more than what I am. And I lost that sense of self. And that taught me a lot about myself. So I love sharing those stories to help people feel less alone in their struggles, less isolated, less disconnected, and that they can relate to someone that they may be able to draw some knowledge and inspiration from. Because if you're getting inspiration from me, that's not me creating the inspiration in you, that's you creating the inspiration in you. And I think we put our self-worth outside of ourselves too often.
I think you provide the tools for people to manage themselves better, which is what you do, Roy, and you do it all based on the science of how humans behave and what motivates us.
Sure, because in many ways we have a lot of similarities and differences from animals. So biologically, it's quite easy to understand, and that takes the guilt away from people. The idea that when you're a young athlete and you don't get into the team or you don't succeed, I mean, Barcelona Academy will have 600 kids at any one time. None of them will play for Barcelona, apart from what their parents think, which is all of them are going to. So this expectation thing that Layne said, the drivenness to outcome, the forgetting that self-reflection of what is valid and authentic for you is critical to the psychological flexibility of young athletes or young medical students or young nursing students, or otherwise they start to look at suicide. We created an app a few years ago, 2017. We launched it. Time magazine said we saved 23,000 lives. I don't know how they got the figure. But,
Go
my
with it.
colleague Amanda, she went with it, I hid. And she got under 30, 30 influencers of the year, and she became CEO of our startup in Delaware and everything else. The critical thing was vulnerability. We used the app to create vulnerability that people could experience without talking. They just had to swipe left and right to express vulnerability. And if you teach vulnerability is good, that you self-reflect, because every first-year medical student, nursing student, is taught to self-reflect on your values. What is valid and authentic? If you failed, you failed. It's okay, but did you fail on your own terms? If you left on your own terms, right? If you're going out of the door, it must be the door that you chose to leave, So the crossing the line, the self-reflection that you talk about is so critical. But what are you reflecting on? What is valid and authentic for you at the time? And that's critical to an athlete mentality or success mentality.
It must be critical to older people as well who have spent a life just fulfilling other people's expectations and succeeding in their business or whatever they've done without being elite athletes. I'm just trying to bring this back to what older people might experience when they retire, and then suddenly they're left with themselves and looking at themselves maybe for the first time in their lives, and how are they going to maintain a sense of self-esteem when how they valued themselves maybe through their work or that has gone. So
same with an athlete, same with an older person. It's your sense of identity. You have an athlete's identity. It's what you've been doing from 4 to whenever you give up. The same with being a lawyer. You started studying at 18 and you now finished at 70, and you are one of those people who goes into work, but the youngsters don't need you. So maintaining your sense, and you mentioned a very important word at the beginning of this whole thing. You said curiosity. The opposite of avoidance of all of this catastrophe of the loss of your identity is curiosity, of being caught up now. Okay, what is valid and authentic for me now that I'm no longer a lawyer or a long-distance athlete? As long as you're true to yourself, that's where the mindset comes in. That's where awake is so important, is wake up to the idea that you are not just an athlete. You are not just a lawyer. Self-reflect on what's valid and authentic for you as a person, and then begin the next phase of your life.
And ideally wake up to that before you become the athlete or before you become the lawyer.
Hopefully have that mindset about what is going to be your intrinsic mastery. That whole idea of getting better and better at what's important to you is critical. Not what's important to the crowds or anybody. What's important to you, now get better at it. So human growth starts when a 72-year-old or an 80-year-old decides they're going to do a whole new and complex thing, create the brain cell connections, and off you go.
Oh, so it's never too late to start a new and complex activity or interest?
You can't afford not to, because you're starting that process of God's waiting room. That older people tell me. And when they come in miserable with highly successful lives, perhaps thinking of the only 1 or 2 things they messed up, then we go, well, what are you going to do in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years? Because if you can write a book like Eddie Jaku at 101, get published in 26 languages, have your own TED Talk, aging, novel, complexity, start, go, why stop?
Yeah, why do we stop?
Well, this is it. Is it our negative thoughts about ourselves and our capacity? Is it physical? I mean, we don't want to break anything, that's for sure. What is stopping us trying new things or having adventures or fear?
And I want to bounce this off Layne. We have an interesting phenomenon in our brain is we compute emotions and logic separately, and emotions are stronger. When we look at a goal, we tend to see the big picture, which is overwhelming. And there are 2 aspects. How desirable is this change for you? And what is your perceived ability? And the interventions are how desirable, love to do it, perceived ability, it's too hard, it's too big, it's going to be too difficult. What happened to baby steps? What happened to micro goals? So the answer is we get this ambivalence, the clash between I would really love to do it, but it's going to be too hard, I'm too old. And then you're done. But what about the desirability? Well, look at the emotional drivers, not the rational ones, I'm too old. The emotional ones, I'd really love to do this, process-based, might never get there. And second of all, your perceived ability is based on age. No, it's based on smaller goals that you can achieve all the way to the big one. So if I decide I'm going to play Wimbledon next year at 72, you'd say you're an idiot. On the other hand, if it's process-based...
Can you play tennis?
Not a chance. But I'll get a coach.
Then I think
I'll
you're crazy.
get a coach. I'll go every day and whatever else.
Yeah.
And by the end of the year, I'll be playing at a club maybe. I'll be playing with other people and beating them. And I'll be loving tennis. I'm never getting to Wimbledon. But the process is going to be great.
Process will be the same too.
The goal's irrelevant. The process. Ooh.
But if we get ahead of ourselves, and I'd actually love to ask you a question about this. So when we set these goals for ourselves, sometimes they can be more audacious than others. So perhaps we set ourselves a big goal, such as becoming a world champion at something. And I think that there's two trains of, there's two modes of motivation. There's, of course, the extrinsic and the intrinsic motivation. The extrinsic motivation can be a force of fear to a degree.
Yes.
Right? So if I think about athletes who have a fear of failure versus athletes that have a fear of success, the outcome in my mentality, and you're the trained psychologist here, so you might be able to help me here understand this even better. The outcome, the associated outcome of success is so scary that they end up sabotaging themselves. And I had a fear of success. Fortunately, what you fear, you attract.
Yes.
So but I became aware of it, so it no longer governed my behaviours. Versus the fear of failure, which gives us reason to just stop.
Yes.
Because we've convinced ourselves over and over and over again that we're never going to make it. So is the lesson here for anyone at any age, when they hit that point of tension, that they become curious in that moment? And so what's the best question that they can ask themselves to step forward?
Why not me? The problem is we all have some kind of an image of ourselves. And Scott Pelton from Tignum and I had this discussion for years in Arizona. We all have an image of ourselves. And to succeed, we have to exceed that image. We have to go past the image. As we do that, we become anxious. And elite athletes, as you'll know, waiting for the right wave, counting all of those, everybody's catching their waves, waiting and going through that first heat. Then you've got the second heat. And, you're so close to success, the fear. The idea is, the first question is, why not me? Because other people do it, and other people might always be more talented, quicker, whatever. But you have to exceed your own image to succeed. And every time you do that, every time you challenge yourself, you need to be curious about how anxious you're going to be, because every change and every growth comes with anxiety. That's where you go for what's valid. I'm going to be curious just about how anxious this makes me. And then live with it and see. That means psychological flexibility, staying in the moment, being curious about the moment and not worrying about the outcome anymore.
Not worrying, being vulnerable, taking a chance, dispel fear.
But fear is natural. The fear of success, that fear of exceeding your image, the fear of most of the athletes I've trained will never win a gold medal, not even come close to a medal at the Olympics, and have been 4 times and loved every second of it, even the cardboard beds. Whatever it is, why not me? If you want to change careers, if you want to become this, you want to do that. We have the children headed for HSC, and we say, well, so you don't get a grade HSC. You can get into any course you want to. Just go and do another degree and do well at it. Do something you enjoy and love. So the critical thing as you get older, there is no point going to a boot camp that you're going to hate, where some young blonde spray tan person who counts your reps and has a mobile phone available to prompt them with AI as to what you should be doing. They should be watching you very carefully. Do you love the exercise? Do you love what you're going to do? Because if you love it, you're probably good at it. And if you're good at it, you probably love it. So now that you've finished your career, now that you've finished your whatever and you cross the line, why not you? The answer is, be curious as to what this is going to demand from you. Do the difficult thing. That's the right thing to do because you have a choice. The easy thing, not going to work.
Yeah.
So
What would you say to people whose family may say, you shouldn't do this, Mum, or you shouldn't do this, Dad, or you're too old for this, or what would you say to people who have external pressures about helping about trying something new.
Why not me?
Yes, same.
I have
Yeah.
plenty of people that in my family and friends circle that say that to me.
You should be
Do you?
slowing down.
Yeah, of course.
What do you mean?
Well, you're too old for this, or you shouldn't be doing that, or
You should slow down.
You
And
should
the
slow
reason
down.
is they're scared for you. So
Yeah.
they're trying to stop you doing what would make you happy, which is to be curious and take risks.
Yeah. They're projecting their fears onto you.
Mm.
They're trying to protect themselves, not you.
Well, of course, they don't want to be a carer of someone.
Exactly.
You know, in a wheelchair if you jumped out of a plane or something. No, jump out of a plane. I know it sounds, I wouldn't do it, but
I love
people love it.
It's great fun.
If it was burning, I'd jump. But
Yeah.
think you've got to be positive. Layne was in a boot for quite a while. That
Right.
means she could float better.
Yeah.
You could float. If you came off
More
the
of a
board, I
grip
will
on
float
that board.
I
you know.
never surfed in a boot. Never
better.
swam in it
Flotation
either.
device.
Yeah, don't need a flotation device.
So just think of fear and human fear and what it might be based on. And that self-reflection is, what am I scared of? What am I afraid of? What have I got to lose? As you get older and older, you might feel that you have a lot to lose, that you are more vulnerable. But that's not true.
Why isn't it true?
Why are you more vulnerable? You're more vulnerable to risk-taking because of expectations of what people do, because of ageism, because old people don't do that. Getting old and not doing things is the excuses are like, why we don't ride a bicycle. Well, I don't have a bicycle.
Yeah.
Or I'm scared I might fall off or whatever else. So the critical reason is, why not me? Is this valid and authentic for me? Because that will bolster your being older and aging so-called gracefully. Yes, you are running against biology, you're running against everything, but the most critical thing is your mindset of what is authentic and valid for you, not for the next 72-year-old. Because by that nature, I should not be, running to Bondi 8Ks there and back uphill, which I hate, but my dog loves it. So, yeah.
Keeping curiosity and challenges in your life is so important because we're always learning. And otherwise, as you said, we're just waiting. What are we waiting for the end? But when you said about fear, that is really important because it translates to so many different aspects of the lives of people as they get older, including I always hear, the families saying, oh, my mum doesn't want any help around the house and I know she needs help, but that comes from fear too, that it's a thin edge of the wedge. If you let someone come in and help you with the washing up, it means that you're not coping and then your family will put you in a home. That's the outcome. That's a big fear, that you will lose your autonomy. But in this way, it sounds like to maintain your autonomy and your independence and maintain your confidence, it's important to have challenges and challenge yourself and make your own decisions.
And being realistic about what those challenges are.
Yes.
Sure, because avoidance, the opposite of curiosity is avoidance. And avoidance is staying safe, but staying safe means learning nothing. We learn nothing from success. You learn from the times you fall off the board.
I learned a little bit about success.
I've never had any, so how would I know?
Rubbish. It's funny that you say you learn nothing from success. I learned a lot from success, but learning how to lose taught me how to win.
Yes.
And it's those failures that we fear as we get older because of a variety of different reasons. Yet, if we maintain our sense of curiosity in those moments, then we get to ask ourselves, is it valid and is it authentic to me? Yeah. So when I came out of the water last weekend, having failed in my eyes because I did not perform the way I wanted to perform, I was able to detach from that and just ask myself, is this still a valid and authentic place that I want to be? Is this still a valuable and authentic environment that I want to subject myself to?
Yeah, do you want to feel like you failed?
Well, no, it's not about feeling like, is it still, do I keep competing?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, because failure is the stepping stone to success. Failure is the necessary part because understanding how you adapt and approach failure enables you to embrace success. But if we don't take the failures in our stride, then we stop trying and we stop putting ourselves, we stop taking risks.
And being realistic is testing that.
Yes. Yeah.
That curiosity is, I'm going to test and see if my daughter's right and I shouldn't be doing that. I'm going to test those limits, which is, again, Scott Pelton's view of exceeding your own image is important. It comes with anxiety. Living with that is the curiosity of, I'm going to test those limits and see, because we don't know what we don't know. And if we do know, or, Lang's dictum or whoever it was, if you don't know, you don't know. You think you do know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know, you do know. You think you don't.
Yeah.
So test it and find out what you know about yourself, which is that critical self-evaluation again.
Mm.
And then ask, well, why not me? I'm going to test that.
Jean, is there something that you're wanting to do that you're fearful of stepping into?
Everything, probably. No. Well, there's something I've always wanted to do, and then I always swore I'd do it by the time I was 40, and then I didn't, and now I'm 70, and now I think it's probably too late. But it may not be. I've always wanted to sculpt. I love doing things with my hands.
As in clay sculpting?
As in, yeah, I think I would probably start with clay and then move on to sort of 10-story bronzes. I don't know. I'd start small.
Why do you think it's too late?
I feel like I have lost capacity in physical.
Oh.
I feel like it's a physical thing, not a mental thing. I know what I would sculpt.
Right.
I know what I would do, but I feel like I couldn't do it physically. And that's sad because sculpture moves me. When I see sculpture, I'm moved. But then it might be like I do it and then I don't get moved except to tears. What a mess, I suppose I'm scared of failing too.
So.
Well, let's turn that around and
Yes.
say sculpting is going to strengthen your hands.
Yeah, well, that would be good. I'm getting a little bit of arthritis.
Good, so you need to use your hands.
Yeah.
Movement is really good for arthritis and clay, and then work your way to Italian marble and really terrorize yourself.
Yeah, just be a Michelangelo. That would be amazing.
So as a psychologist, if Jean was sitting opposite you in your room and she's telling you this story.
She has an image of the strength of her hands she hasn't tested. She hasn't been curious about testing her hands. I would get you to test the strength of your hands and to increase the strength of your hands and your range of movement and deal with the arthritis and strengthen everything and then get busy with clay. Why not?
Because the first thing that I think about,
Yeah.
it's all about me, is that I wanted to build the strength in my body again because menopause stripped me of my strength. And I surrendered to menopause and just went, oh, that's my deal, done. And then I thought, I want to get strong. I need to go back to the gym. And going back to the gym terrified me because I didn't know what to do.
Yes.
I've always had a personal trainer.
Yeah.
So I rang a friend and said, I need a personal trainer. And then I was afraid to fail in front of my personal trainer, but I was also afraid to feel weak. But I thought, to feel strong, I have to embrace the fact that I am weaker right now. But if I keep doing the thing and showing up and building my capacity, then I will become stronger over time.
Yeah.
Same thing with your hands.
Not look at the big picture.
Yes.
Because that's the other thing, afraid that what I make is not what I have in my mind.
Yes.
Right, but you can make it over time.
Yes.
But detach, as Roy said.
And maybe it's not important. Maybe the process is what we've been talking
You'll
about.
find that out in the process.
I'll find it out if I just do it.
Why not
do
you?
it.
Why not you?
Yeah, why not?
We're going to ring a sculptor tomorrow. We're going to get you booked in.
Oh, I just had this. I felt like my heart just jumped into my throat.
Shows you how important it is to become that creative and see something growing outside of you and being able to change it and
Manipulate
create
it.
a vision of what it should be. And, Michelangelo took, this horrible piece of marble that somebody threw out and he saw David in it.
Well, thank you so much for that encouragement. All right. I think I'll do it. I'll report back.
Please do.
Yeah.
We'd love to.
All right.
I want to see the sculpture because if you think about the audience that's listening, they're probably saying, well, it's all right for those two. They've gone on and achieved greatness.
Yeah.
What about people who have predominantly lived a stagnant life or haven't really achieved anything that they consider to be big or audacious or great?
Well, I would say, first of all, I'm just challenge you on the word stagnant because most people live lives that have a whole lot going on.
Yes,
all
that's
the
true.
time.
Thank you.
And dealing with lots of stuff.
No such thing as stagnant.
Yeah,
really.
no,
If
not
you're still
really.
alive, you're not being stagnant.
But it's a really good word because people encourage you to stagnation as you get older. They'll
Yes.
give you all these facts about what you can't do any longer or you shouldn't, and your bones and your brain and your reactions. So you're constantly getting this negative thing about aging. You're not actually getting a lot of positive things, facts where you're, Roy, you've got all the facts and evidence. All the evidence seems to be we should embrace aging and just, behave our age and sit down and be conversational and put your feet up and wear a dressing gown and listen to marching bands or something,
I have 3 things to say to that. Poo, poo, poo.
Okay.
Heaven forbid, because, the stereotyping and everybody's different. Everybody's life is different. Some people come to me and at the end of their working careers and say, I don't believe I've achieved anything and everything else. So the issue is across the lifespan, and the rot starts early, is to decide, especially mentioned earlier, athletes or any human being, decide what's important to you. Self-reflect. It can change from minute to minute, hour to hour, day. But if you're not being authentic and valid with yourself, you're going to land up in a psychologist's rooms, anxious or miserable. And the first question I ask them is, what's valid and authentic? Because when you get miserable after a life of maybe not doing much, what are you really saying? Is that what happened throughout your life wasn't valid for you. It wasn't authentic for you. And now you are old and you are Kentucky Fried Chicken Colonel Saunders at 65 and you are going to make chicken. Or Mrs. Fields, whose husband has walked out the door and she's going to make cookies.
Yes.
$400 million worth of cookies. So the whole idea is if you are in that stasis, let's call it stasis.
Yeah, I like
rather
that,
than,
stasis.
Yes, stasis.
Nice word from stagnation.
Yes,
and if
stasis.
you're not a sprite who is bounding around beautifully, being sprightly, then think about the fact that it's never too late to go and look at what is valid and authentic and what isn't, and then have the courage to commit yourself to a committed life from that moment on. Give you a quick example. I have a client who is a great scientist. He was nominated for Nobel Prizes, God knows what. 84 years old, decided it was time to die. Because all he wanted to do was play the violin, and he was good at it. So he found this bus in Israel that travels around to schools introducing kids to classical music. It's a whole orchestra of old people like him. And he spent the last 9 years of his life doing that, playing to kids. And never mind his organic chemistry, it was never valid and authentic for him.
The chemistry?
No, his
Right.
whole life
The
wasn't valid
violin
and
was.
authentic.
Uh,
The violin or photography, or people 70 start painting and
Yes.
actually paint beautifully. So why not?
I feel that the beauty in this conversation is inspiring people to embrace the challenge of embracing their passion and connecting with what that is, and then giving themselves permission to explore that without the expectation to be the best in it or to be great at it. And perhaps, in childhood, and trauma is trauma, pain is pain. We've all experienced moments within our childhood that are still playing out to this day. And if we can start to learn to tap into what those stories are, and there's about 7 or 8 of them that we keep coming back to, then we can start to disengage from them and detach from them and start to write a different story. But if we're allowing old behavioural patterns from childhood to dictate who we are today as an adult, then we're missing out the chance. We're delaying the opportunity to embrace those passions. And the number one regret of the dying is I wish I had the courage to live a life that I love.
And that means embracing a narrative that is your narrative, not
Yes.
your kids, your family, whatever. You tell your own story and you make that story go where you want. It's your narrative, it's your story. And if the story of your last 50 years wasn't good enough, tell another story.
Yes.
And that storytelling of the beginning and the middle and the end is yours to decide. So the courage and curiosity and exceeding the image that the old story, well, why not? This is living.
I feel that if you don't sort of confront your fears, either physical or emotional, psychological, spiritual, existential, if you don't confront them, then you're going to live a fearful life, and that's going to really limit you. And it's probably going to impact your family too, because as you get older, you may be a grandparent and you may have great influence on your grandchildren. You might have already made all your mistakes with your children, but it's never too late to learn about yourself and how a better way of living.
Well, fears are valid too.
Yeah, fears are valid and they're acceptable and they're part of life, and there are warning signs like pain and fear, all the same thing. These are warning signs, but we don't have to necessarily live our lives according to them. Just think of pain. 30% is dealt with by medication, 70% is psychosocial. So the reason psychologists deal with pain is we've got a 70% window there to help someone get away from chronic pain. 30% is medication, 70%. According to Zofnas and other researchers, 70% is the interaction with another human being that normalizes the pain and anxiety and the sadness into the here and now. Now that you have the pain, accept it. What now becomes critical? How have your values shifted? What's important to you now? And that's self-reflection again. What is important to me given these circumstances? Yes, you're afraid. I'm not worried about that.
Well, that's great to... Yeah, not worried about fear. Not to be fearful of fear. Well, fear itself. Yes.
Good
So,
best statement by an American president. If you're afraid of fear, you are paralyzed. You are static.
the other thing, I suppose, for older people, and I keep saying older people, later life probably is, I could say
Mature? Can we say that?
mature people.
I don't know.
Yeah, where
What is
some
the-
of us
what
are
is the
mature.
term?
Well, I like
Lived.
to use, those of us in later life,
Okay.
maybe, rather than older, because we don't feel it, is how to maintain a sense of purpose. And I know you speak about purpose being, I think I heard you, but please tell me, it's values and people with the same values in your
Values,
life
mastery, like-mindedness, and growth.
and growth. And that gives you purpose.
Yes, that's the model for the state of California, which is the thing we defend most, is the idea that what we do makes a difference. If we embark on actions that have no outcome for us at all, and we don't enjoy the process, then mastery disappears and a sense of autonomy disappears. So you can define purpose as this progressive realization of what I do makes a difference, surrounded by people who have the same values as me, but the guiding, what is this autonomy? It's around the things that matter to me. So that defines your purpose. Right?
So values, mastery.
Like-mindedness. You need
like-mindedness.
people around you. You need your squad who think the
You need
same
your
way as
dream
you
team.
do. Yeah, you need your team, your squad,
Mm-hmm. And
So-
then what was there?
And
Fourth? Growth, of course. Yeah.
Mastery, getting better and better at what matters to you.
Right. But if what matters to you is being comfortable, how do you grow in that state?
Well, you get really good at being comfortable.
But if being comfortable is eating food that's not great and sitting on the couch and binge watching television until, people give up on life as they get older.
They do the easy things
do
that
the
are
easy
the wrong
things.
things to do because they don't understand they have a choice.
Right.
When we get people who are miserable, depressed, whatever, we have to then motivate them. In other words, as you said, inspire some drive in them. But what it is emotional. So we work on emotional drivers for some like that. They have to find, the why, and then they can get the how. But it's not something we give them. We're just visiting people's lives. When they change, it is on their own terms. So we help them tell a story. And in that story, they become the hero who gets off the couch, who stops eating for the most part, but they have to find that purpose driven by values. So we help them with values. We help them to make the argument. I can't make the argument for them. I'm just visiting people's lives.
You're just providing the framework.
Yep, I
they're
paint a
feeling it.
frame and they do the artwork
do the
themselves.
So can you actually, because I was going to ask you, what would you say to people to help motivate them who are thinking of trying a new venture or adventure, trying to challenge themselves? What would you say to people who were overcome with, I can't do this? What would each of you say?
I'd like to hear the psychologist point of view first.
Sure, think of the big picture. I take them out of the big picture immediately because if you're getting older, the big picture is not a good one. If you're going to look at it, because you all go out the same way. Okay? So the whole idea is don't look at the big picture. When you're young, you can look at big pictures because it seems endless. As you get older, you need to look at smaller and smaller bites of pictures, which will still get you to the big picture. But if you look at the big picture, your own emotional sense of being overwhelmed comes in quickly. I want this, but it's too hard. Technically, ambivalence. So when they're sitting in my room, obviously, they're not happy. When they are happy, well, I don't see them. I leave them alone.
They leave you alone.
Yeah, but obviously people come when what's happening in their life is not valid for them. And then we have that discussion of, okay, what's going to be important for you now? But don't look at the big picture. It's overwhelming, and that sense of self-efficacy, that what I do makes a difference, Bandura 1952, whatever it was, that feeling of loss of control, of loss of self-efficacy is the scary thing that we have to address, because then you're not living life according to values. Other people's values are driving you, and it's not working.
And if you've lived your whole life according to other people's values because you're conforming to fit in, to belong, which is what our biggest driving force is with every one of us. We want to belong. We want to feel safe. If you don't feel safe, then you're going to continuously find ways to manufacture or create that environment for yourself. Safety.
Yeah, which might be closing the door.
It might be, I mean, it could be
isolating yourself sometimes.
Yes, and sometimes we all need to.
That's avoidance.
Yeah, it's avoidance. Yeah, unless you're an introvert,
which is good avoidance, but for you.
I mean, everything comes at a cost, right? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and I look at, for example, my professional surfing career as, when I reflect on those world title campaigns, the cost of winning world titles with an outcome-focused mentality was significant, to the point now I'm in my 50s in constant pain management because I didn't listen. The body whispers before it screams, and my body was screaming and I still wasn't tuning in because I had this must-win at all cost mentality. And that's what costs us our joy, our connection, our sense of belonging, our sense of self, our health, our well-being. I compromised, I sacrificed it because the outcome was more important to me than my health and well-being. My ability to actually achieve the goal was put a second. So to Roy's point about being really clear around who you are and getting out of the outcome-driven mentality and just asking yourself, what's valuable to me? That's the gold right there.
And when you look at that big picture that I mentioned earlier, and what you just said is so critical, with every elite person and every ordinary person, when you look at the big picture, what you're seeing is the sacrifices you would have to make.
Yes.
And that can be really daunting. And that's where your negative emotions come in, and you go, that's going to be too hard. And that's where meaning and values and emotional drivers come in, is if I'm going to sacrifice, if I'm going to give up things I love for something I love more, I better be clear on why I'm doing it.
It's really never too late. I mean, that's the point. There's no, what I'm getting from both of you, with the science and the experience, there's no expiry date on pushing ourselves, challenging ourselves, and certainly it'll give us an expiry date if we don't maintain our curiosity and if we don't go out there and be true to ourselves. So I feel like we've just had the most amazing therapy session. I've really valued your experience and your expertise, both of you. And thank you for speaking with us all today. Is there anything else you would like to say to add to this? Something for the listeners? Is there anything that you would like to say?
The one last thing I'd like to say, one last piece of advice would be, don't let the old person creep in.
Yes. That's such a great expression. I love that expression.
Yeah. I saw a video of a 95-year-old choreographer from New York. She said, if you give old age an inch, it takes all of you. And then they said to her, when are you going to retire? She says, when it's a non-shockable rhythm.
That's fantastic.
So thank you so much for having me, certainly. And
thank you.
Fantastic to
thank
have
you, Dr. Roy Sugarman, and thank you, Layne Beachley.
Thank you, Jean Kittson.
Thank you to this week's guests, Layne Beachley and Roy Sugarman. You've been listening to Dare, the Time of Your Life, brought to you by Australian seniors. Please leave a review and share this show with someone you know. Visit seniors.com.au/podcast for more episodes. May your life be daring. I'm Jean Kittson.